Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she cleaned her rifle for the third time that morning. The military base in Afghanistan was already buzzing with activity, even though the sun had barely risen above the dusty mountains. She sat alone in the corner of the weapons tent, away from the groups of male soldiers who always seemed to find reasons to stare at her. At 26 years old, Maria had already proven herself as one of the finest marksmen in her unit. But, being the only female sniper in a company of 200 men meant she had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Every shot had to be perfect. Every mission had to be flawless. There was no room for mistakes when you were constantly being watched and judged. Santos. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. Commander wants to see you. Now. Maria quickly assembled her rifle and headed toward the command tent. She had learned early in her military career that when a commander called, you didn't ask questions. You just moved. The other soldiers watched her walk past, some with respect in their eyes, others with something else entirely. She had grown used to both looks over the past 3 years. The command tent was filled with maps, communication equipment, and the smell of strong coffee. Commander Jackson, a tall man with gray hair and intense blue eyes, looked up from a stack of papers as she entered. Behind him stood Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, a man Maria had never seen before but whose chest full of medals spoke of extensive combat experience. Santos, take a seat, Commander Jackson said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from years of leading men in dangerous situations. We have a situation that requires your particular skill set. Maria sat down, keeping her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She had learned that maintaining perfect military bearing was essential, especially when she was often the only woman in the room. Any sign of weakness or nervousness would be noticed and remembered. 3 days ago, we lost contact with a reconnaissance team operating near the Pakistani border, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes began, his voice calm but serious. Intelligence suggests they're being held by a group of insurgents in a heavily fortified compound about 30 kilometers from here. The commander spread a satellite photograph across the small table between them. Maria studied the image carefully, noting the layout of buildings, the surrounding terrain, and potential vantage points. Her mind automatically began calculating distances, wind patterns, and escape routes. The compound is built into the side of a mountain, Commander Jackson continued. There's only one way in and one way out by vehicle. The insurgents have positioned guards at strategic points around the perimeter. Any conventional rescue attempt would result in heavy casualties, both for our forces and the hostages. Maria nodded, understanding where this conversation was heading. Her specialty was long-range precision shooting, often from positions that other soldiers couldn't reach or hold. She had earned her reputation by making impossible shots in impossible conditions. What makes this situation even more complicated, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes added, is that one of the hostages is Captain Jennifer Walsh. She's a military intelligence officer who was gathering information about insurgent supply lines when her team was captured. The name meant nothing to Maria, but she could see from the expressions of the two officers that Captain Walsh was someone important. In the military, rank mattered, but so did the type of information a person might possess. An intelligence officer in enemy hands was a serious problem. Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do? Maria asked, though she already suspected the answer. Commander Jackson leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers directly. We need you to position yourself on the ridge overlooking the compound. From there, you'll have a clear line of sight to the guard positions. When our extraction team moves in, you'll provide overwatch and eliminate any threats that could compromise the mission. Maria studied the satellite image again, this time focusing on the ridgeline the commander had mentioned. It was at least 800 meters from the compound, a challenging shot even under perfect conditions. The altitude, wind, and heat would all affect bullet trajectory. Plus, she would be working alone, without a spotter to help with calculations. The ridge position looks exposed, sir, she observed. How long would I need to hold that position? Potentially 12 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes replied. You'd move into position before dawn, remain hidden throughout the day, and provide support for the extraction that evening. It won't be easy. Maria had spent entire days motionless in sniper positions before. It was part of the job that most people didn't understand. Being a sniper wasn't just about shooting accurately, it was about patience, endurance, and the mental strength to remain focused for hours at a time. What about extraction for me after the mission? She asked. You'll extract with the main team, Commander Jackson said. But, Maria, I need to be completely honest with you. This is a volunteer mission. The risk level is extremely high. If something goes wrong, if you're discovered or if the extraction fails, you could be on your own for an extended period. Maria had volunteered for dangerous missions before, but something about the way the commander spoke made this feel different. She looked at the photograph again, memorizing every detail of the terrain. The compound was isolated, surrounded by hostile territory. If the mission failed, survival would depend entirely on her own skills and training. Why me, sir? She asked. There are other snipers in the unit. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes exchanged a glance with Commander Jackson before answering. Because you're the best long-range shooter we have, and because this mission requires someone who can remain undetected for an extended period. Your size and ability to move through difficult terrain without being noticed makes you the logical choice. It was a diplomatic way of saying that being smaller and lighter than her male counterparts was actually an advantage in this situation. Maria had often felt that her physical differences were seen as weaknesses, but, in covert operations, they could be strengths. I'll need detailed weather reports for the next 3 days, she said, accepting the mission without formally stating it. Wind speed and direction, temperature variations, humidity levels. I'll also need ammunition specifications and a detailed map of the approach route to the ridge. Commander Jackson smiled slightly, recognizing her acceptance. Already prepared, he said, handing her a thick folder. Study everything tonight. You'll move out tomorrow before dawn with a support team that will get you within 2 kilometers of the position. From there, you're on your own. Maria took the folder and stood to leave, but Lieutenant Colonel Hayes stopped her with a question. Santos, have you ever had to take a life from long range? It was a question that went to the heart of what being a sniper really meant. Training on targets and paper silhouettes was completely different from putting a human being in your crosshairs and pulling the trigger. Maria had been in combat situations before, but always as part of a larger unit where individual responsibility was shared. No, sir, she answered honestly. But I understand what the mission requires. Make sure you do, he said seriously. Because tomorrow night, lives will depend on your ability to do whatever is necessary to ensure the success of this mission. That evening, Maria spread the contents of the folder across her small cot in the women's quarters. The weather reports showed consistent wind patterns but potential temperature fluctuations that could affect her shooting. The maps revealed a challenging approach route through rocky terrain that would require several hours of careful movement in complete darkness. The photographs of the compound were more detailed than the satellite image she had seen earlier. She could identify individual guard positions, potential hiding spots for hostages, and the most likely routes the extraction team would use. Every detail would be important when the mission began. As she studied the materials, other female soldiers in the quarters occasionally asked questions or offered encouragement. There were only 15 women on the entire base, and they had developed a strong sense of mutual support. But Maria couldn't tell them about the specific details of her mission, so she simply said she would be away for a few days on a classified operation. Private Johnson, a young medic who had arrived at the base just 2 weeks earlier, sat down on the adjacent cot. Maria, can I ask you something? Sure, Maria replied, not looking up from the maps. How do you handle being the only woman doing what you do? I mean, being a medic is different. People expect women to be medics. But, being a sniper. Maria looked at the young soldier, remembering her own early days in the military when everything felt overwhelming and uncertain. You prove yourself every single day, she said simply. You work harder than everyone else, you never complain, and you never give them a reason to doubt your abilities. But, don't you ever get tired of having to prove yourself constantly? Maria folded one of the maps and met the young woman's eyes. Every day. But, the alternative is accepting that I don't belong here, and I refuse to do that. This is my job, and I'm good at it. That has to be enough. Later that night, as the base settled into the quiet rhythms of sleep, Maria lay awake thinking about the mission ahead. She had always known that eventually she would face a situation where her role as a sniper would require her to make life and death decisions. Tomorrow would be that day. She thought about Captain Walsh and the other hostages, people she had never met but whose lives might depend on her actions. She thought about the extraction team that would be counting on her to protect them as they moved through dangerous terrain. And she thought about her own family back home, who still didn't fully understand what she did for a living. Her parents had supported her decision to join the military, but they worried constantly about her safety. They sent letters filled with news from home and careful questions about when she might return. Maria never told them about the dangerous missions or the constant pressure she faced as a female soldier in a male-dominated field. As dawn approached, Maria gathered her equipment and prepared for the mission that would change everything. She had no way of knowing that her actions over the next 24 hours would eventually lead to a moment of recognition that would mean more to her than any medal or commendation. The compound in the mountains held more than just hostages. It held the opportunity for Maria to prove, once and for all, that courage and skill had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with the heart of the person behind the rifle. But first, she had to survive what was about to become the longest and most dangerous day of her military career. Maria moved through the darkness like a shadow, her footsteps silent on the rocky ground. Behind her, Corporal Davis and Private Mitchell followed at a distance, carrying additional equipment and serving as her initial support team. They would accompany her for the first part of the journey, then return to base while she continued alone to her final position. The night air was cold at this altitude, and Maria could see her breath in small puffs as she navigated the treacherous mountain path. Every piece of equipment had been carefully chosen for minimal weight and maximum efficiency. Her rifle, a custom-modified weapon that she had spent months adjusting to her exact specifications, was secured across her back. Extra ammunition, water, food rations, camouflage materials, and emergency medical supplies filled her pack. "LZ in sight," whispered Corporal Davis through his radio headset. The landing zone was a small clearing where they would separate, with Maria continuing alone while the support team established a temporary observation post to monitor radio communications. Maria checked her watch. They were exactly on schedule, which was crucial for a mission where timing could mean the difference between success and disaster. The extraction team would begin their approach in exactly 18 hours, and she needed to be in position well before then, to assess the situation and identify any changes from the intelligence reports. "Santos, you sure you don't want us to go further with you?" Private Mitchell asked quietly. He was young, perhaps 21, and this was his first deployment to Afghanistan. Maria could hear the concern in his voice. "Negative," she replied, adjusting the straps on her pack. 2 kilometers from here, the terrain becomes too exposed. 3 people moving would increase the risk of detection significantly. She was right, and they all knew it. From this point forward, her survival would depend on her ability to move undetected through hostile territory. The intelligence reports suggested that insurgent patrols operated throughout the area, and any contact before reaching her position would compromise the entire mission. "Remember," Corporal Davis said, "radio check every 4 hours. If we don't hear from you by 1400 hours, we initiate emergency protocols." Maria nodded, understanding that emergency protocols meant extracting the support team and aborting the mission. If something happened to her during the approach, there would be no rescue attempt. The risk to additional personnel would be too great. She set off alone into the mountains, following a route she had memorized from studying topographical maps. The path required her to move through a series of ravines and around exposed ridgelines where insurgent lookouts might be positioned. Every step had to be carefully planned to avoid loose rocks that could create noise or open areas where she might be visible. The physical challenge of moving through this terrain while carrying a full pack and weapons was enormous. Maria was in excellent physical condition, but the altitude and difficult footing made every step an effort. She forced herself to maintain a steady pace, knowing that falling behind schedule could jeopardize the entire operation. As the first hints of dawn appeared in the eastern sky, Maria reached a rocky outcropping about 1 kilometer from her final position. She took shelter behind a large boulder and used her binoculars to survey the area ahead. The compound was visible in the distance, a collection of low buildings built into the mountainside exactly as shown in the satellite photographs. Through her binoculars, she could see movement around the compound. Guards were changing shifts, and smoke was rising from what appeared to be a cooking fire. The insurgents were maintaining normal routines, which suggested they felt secure in their position and were not expecting an attack. Maria studied the guard positions carefully, noting the timing of patrols and the weapons carried by each sentry. This information would be crucial for the extraction team to plan their approach. She also looked for any signs of the hostages, but the buildings blocked her view of most of the compound's interior areas. The final approach to her sniper position required crossing an exposed slope where she would be visible from the compound if anyone was looking in her direction. She would have to time this movement perfectly, during a gap in the guard patrols, and move quickly enough to avoid detection. She waited patiently for 45 minutes, timing the guard rotations and identifying a 12-minute window when the slope would be unobserved. When the moment came, she moved with the speed and precision of someone whose life depended on not being seen. The sniper position was a narrow ledge behind a cluster of rocks that provided both concealment and a clear field of fire toward the compound. Maria spent the next hour carefully arranging camouflage materials and setting up her rifle for the long shot ahead. At 847 meters, it would be one of the longest shots of her career, complicated by elevation changes and unpredictable wind patterns. She settled into position and began the mental preparation that was as important as the physical aspects of sniping. For the next 12 hours, this small space among the rocks would be her entire world. She would not be able to move freely, eat normally, or relax her concentration for even a moment. Through her rifle scope, Maria began detailed surveillance of the compound. She could see 4 permanent guard positions and identified the routes used by mobile patrols. The main building appeared to be where the hostages were being held, based on the concentration of guards around it. At 0800 hours, she made her first radio check with the support team. Overwatch in position, she reported. For visible sentries, mobile patrols every 30 minutes. No visual confirmation of hostages yet. Copy that, Overwatch, came the reply from Corporal Davis. Weather reports show wind increasing throughout the day. Current conditions are 5 mph from the southwest. Wind was a sniper's constant concern. Even a gentle breeze could deflect a bullet enough to turn a precise shot into a complete miss. Maria made careful notes about wind direction and speed, information she would need to calculate her shots when the time came. As the morning progressed, Maria observed the daily routines within the compound. She counted at least 8 insurgents, though there were likely more inside the buildings. Their weapons appeared to be a mixture of AK-47 assault rifles and older bolt-action rifles. 2 guards carried what looked like rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Around midday, Maria finally got her first glimpse of the hostages. A door opened in the main building, and she could see several figures being moved from one room to another under armed guard. Through her scope, she counted 4 people, which matched the intelligence reports about the missing reconnaissance team. One of the hostages was clearly a woman, confirming the presence of Captain Walsh. Even at this distance, Maria could see that the hostages appeared to be in poor condition. They moved slowly, suggesting either injury or the effects of prolonged captivity. The sight of the hostages reminded Maria of why she was lying motionless on a rocky ledge in the Afghan mountains. These were fellow soldiers whose only crime had been doing their jobs in a dangerous place. They were depending on her and the extraction team to bring them home safely. At 1400 hours, Maria made her scheduled radio check. Overwatch to base. Hostages confirmed in main building. 8 visible insurgents, possibly more inside. Recommend extraction team approach from the north slope to avoid primary patrol routes. Copy, Overwatch. Extraction team departs base in 2 hours. Estimated arrival at your position is 1900 hours. 5 more hours. Maria shifted slightly to relieve pressure on her left leg, then returned to her surveillance. The afternoon heat was becoming intense, and she could feel sweat building up under her camouflage clothing. Dehydration was a constant risk in this environment, but drinking too much water would create other problems during a 12-hour mission. Around 1600 hours, activity in the compound increased significantly. Additional guards appeared, and there was considerable movement between buildings. Maria watched carefully, trying to determine if this represented a routine change or if the insurgents had somehow learned about the planned rescue attempt. Through her scope, she saw a vehicle approaching the compound from the east. It was an old pickup truck carrying several armed men. As they entered the compound, Maria could see them talking animatedly with the guards. Something was happening, and it wasn't part of the normal routine she had observed throughout the day. The new arrivals gathered in front of the main building, and Maria could see them pointing in various directions as if giving instructions. Then, to her alarm, several guards began moving toward positions that would give them better views of the surrounding terrain, including the area where the extraction team would approach. Overwatch to base, urgent, Maria whispered into her radio. Unknown vehicle arrived at compound. Insurgents repositioning guards. Possible security alert. Extraction approach may be compromised. Copy, Overwatch. Can you determine cause of alert? Maria studied the scene through her scope, trying to read the body language and movements of the people below. The urgency of their actions suggested they had received some kind of warning, but she couldn't tell if it was related to the rescue mission or some other threat. Negative on cause, but they're definitely responding to something. Recommend delaying extraction until situation stabilizes. There was a long pause before the reply came. Overwatch, intel reports suggest hostages may be moved tomorrow morning. Extraction must proceed tonight. Continue surveillance and report any changes. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If the hostages were going to be moved, this might be the last chance to rescue them. But approaching a compound full of alert guards would be incredibly dangerous for the extraction team. As evening approached, Maria prepared for the most challenging part of her mission. Soon, American soldiers would be moving through the darkness below, counting on her to protect them with precisely placed shots. The insurgents were now more alert than expected, and the margin for error had become virtually non-existent. She checked her rifle one final time, confirming that every setting was perfect for the shots she might have to make. In a few hours, Maria Santos would discover whether all her training and preparation were enough to save the lives of people she had never met, while protecting the soldiers who were risking everything to bring them home. The mountains around her were completely silent now, but Maria knew that silence would not last much longer. As darkness fell over the Afghan mountains, Maria could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. 12 hours of motionless surveillance had left her body cramped and sore, but her mind remained razor-sharp. Through her night vision scope, she watched the compound below, where insurgents had been maintaining heightened alert status since the afternoon. At exactly 1900 hours, her radio crackled with a whispered transmission. Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We're in position 1 kilometer south of your location. Ready to begin approach. Maria keyed her radio once to acknowledge, then twice to indicate the compound was still on alert. The extraction team leader, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and understood that changes in enemy behavior could indicate anything from routine paranoia to advanced knowledge of an impending attack. Through her scope, Maria could see the extraction team beginning their careful movement down the mountainside. For soldiers dressed in dark clothing and carrying specialized equipment for close-quarters combat. They moved like ghosts through the terrain, using shadows and natural cover to remain invisible. Alpha Team to Overwatch, came Rodriguez's voice through her earpiece. We count 7 visible sentries. Can you confirm? Maria swept her scope across the compound, checking each guard position carefully. Overwatch confirms 7 visible. 2 additional moving patrol, location unknown. Main building has 2 guards on north side, 1 on south approach. The extraction plan called for Rodriguez and his team to approach the main building from the north, where the terrain provided the best concealment. Maria's job was to eliminate any guards who might detect the team's approach or threaten them during the extraction of the hostages. What made this situation particularly challenging was that Maria had never been asked to take a human life. All her training had prepared her for this moment, but there was an enormous difference between shooting at paper targets and putting another person in your crosshairs. Tonight, that training would be tested in the most serious way possible. Alpha Team beginning final approach, Rodriguez reported. Overwatch, we need continuous surveillance on those 2 northside guards. Maria adjusted her position slightly to get a better angle on the guards Rodriguez had mentioned. Through her scope, she could see them clearly. They were young men, probably in their 20s, carrying automatic weapons and scanning the darkness beyond their position. They had no idea that American soldiers were moving toward them through the night. The extraction team reached the outer perimeter of the compound without being detected. Maria could see them using hand signals to coordinate their movements as they prepared to breach the building where the hostages were being held. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but she knew that could change in an instant. Overwatch, we have a problem, Rodriguez whispered urgently. Additional vehicle approaching from the east. Unknown number of occupants. Maria swung her scope toward the eastern approach and saw headlights moving along the dirt road that led to the compound. The timing couldn't have been worse. The extraction team was committed to their approach, but additional insurgents arriving at the compound would complicate everything. Vehicle contains at least 6 individuals, Maria reported. ETA to compound is 3 minutes. The extraction team had a critical decision to make. They could abort the mission and withdraw, leaving the hostages for another day, or they could proceed rapidly and hope to extract the hostages before the new arrivals could organize a response. Either choice carried enormous risks. "We're proceeding," Rodriguez decided. "Overwatch, as soon as that vehicle enters the compound, we need you to disable it if possible." Maria understood what he was asking. Disabling the vehicle meant shooting the driver or putting rounds into the engine block to prevent the insurgents from pursuing the extraction team during their withdrawal. It would be her first shot of the mission, and it would have to be perfect. The vehicle, an old military truck, rumbled into the compound and stopped near the main building. Maria could see armed men jumping out of the back while the driver and passenger exited from the front cab. Through her scope, she watched the driver, a bearded man in his 30s wearing traditional Afghan clothing and carrying an AK-47. "Alpha team is at the building," Rodriguez reported. Beginning entry. Suddenly, shouts erupted from inside the compound. Someone had spotted the extraction team, and the carefully planned covert operation was turning into a firefight. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as insurgents began shooting toward the main building. "Taking fire," Rodriguez called over the radio. "Overwatch, we need immediate support." Maria centered her crosshairs on the driver of the truck, who was moving toward a position where he could fire at the extraction team. 847 meters away, with wind gusting from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. She made rapid mental calculations for bullet drop and wind drift, then gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through her scope she saw the driver stumble and fall. Her first shot in combat had found its target, but there was no time to think about what she had just done. The extraction team was under fire from multiple positions, and they needed her help immediately. "Good shot, Overwatch," Rodriguez called. "Continue suppressing the compound perimeter." Maria shifted her aim to a guard who was firing at the extraction team from behind a concrete barrier. Her second shot sent the man diving for cover, though she couldn't tell if she had hit him. The important thing was that he had stopped shooting at her fellow soldiers. Inside the compound, explosions and gunfire indicated that the extraction team had breached the main building and was fighting their way to the hostages. Maria could see muzzle flashes through the windows as the battle moved inside the structure. "We have the hostages," Rodriguez reported. "For civilians, all mobile but in poor condition. Beginning withdrawal to extraction point Alpha." Through her scope, Maria saw figures emerging from the back of the main building. The extraction team was moving in a tactical formation, with 2 soldiers providing security while the other 2 helped the rescued hostages. Even at this distance, Maria could see that the hostages were having difficulty moving quickly. The insurgents were organizing a pursuit, and Maria could see armed men moving to cut off the extraction team's withdrawal route. She identified a group of 3 insurgents who were positioning themselves behind a stone wall where they could ambush the Americans as they retreated. Her third shot shattered on the stone wall, sending fragments flying and forcing the insurgents to seek better cover. Her fourth shot caught one of them as he tried to move to a new position. The man fell and didn't get up. "Overwatch, we're taking heavy fire from the compound," Rodriguez called. "Can you suppress the main building?" Maria shifted her aim back to the compound, where insurgents were firing from multiple positions. She began placing precisely aimed shots to keep the enemy fighters pinned down and unable to pursue the extraction team effectively. Each shot was carefully calculated to maximum impact while conserving ammunition. The withdrawal was turning into a running firefight as the extraction team moved through the rocky terrain with the rescued hostages. Maria could see the group through her night vision scope, moving as quickly as possible while the hostages' condition would allow. Captain Walsh appeared to be supporting one of the other rescued soldiers who was having difficulty walking. "Alpha team, be advised you have pursuit," Maria reported. 6 insurgents moving along the ridgeline to your north. They're trying to get ahead of your position. Copy, Overwatch. Can you engage? The insurgents pursuing the extraction team were now at the extreme limit of Maria's effective range, and they were moving through terrain that provided intermittent concealment. She would have to time her shots perfectly to hit targets that appeared only briefly between rocks and trees. Her 5th shot missed, kicking up dust near the lead pursuer. Her 6th shot found its target, and she saw one of the insurgents fall. The others immediately sought cover, which slowed their pursuit and gave the extraction team additional time to reach safety. "Alpha team is clear of immediate danger," Rodriguez reported. "Proceeding to extraction point Alpha."
Estimate arrival in 20 minutes.
Maria maintained her surveillance of the compound and surrounding area, watching for any signs of organized pursuit or attempts to cut off the extraction team's route to the helicopter landing zone. The insurgents appeared to be regrouping, but they were moving cautiously after taking casualties from her long-range fire. As the extraction team moved further from the compound, Maria began preparing for her own withdrawal from the sniper position. She had been lying motionless for over 14 hours, and her body was cramped and dehydrated. More importantly, she had expended most of her ammunition and the insurgents now knew approximately where the shots had come from. Overwatch to Alpha Team, she radioed. I count at least 4 insurgents moving toward my position.
Beginning withdrawal to extraction point Bravo. Copy, Overwatch. Outstanding work tonight. Extraction helicopter will pick up both teams at designated points.
Maria carefully packed her equipment, ensuring that she left no trace of her presence on the mountainside. As a sniper, leaving behind any evidence that could help an enemy track her or her unit was a serious breach of protocol. She also policed her brass, collecting the empty shell casings from her fired rounds. The withdrawal from her position required moving through the same dangerous terrain she had crossed during her approach, but now she was exhausted and the insurgents were actively searching for her. Every step had to be planned carefully to avoid detection while moving as quickly as possible toward the helicopter landing zone. As she made her way down the mountainside, Maria finally had time to process what had happened during the firefight. She had taken at least 2 lives tonight, possibly more, and had played a crucial role in saving the lives of 4 American hostages and the soldiers who rescued them. The weight of what she had done would stay with her forever, but she also knew that her actions had been necessary and justified. The hostages were now free, and the extraction team had completed their mission successfully because she had provided the overwatch and fire support they needed. Behind her, the compound was now quiet except for the occasional shout from insurgents who were still searching for threats in the darkness. By the time they organized an effective pursuit, Maria and the extraction teams would be aboard helicopters flying back to base. As she approached the helicopter landing zone, Maria could hear the distant sound of rotor blades cutting through the mountain air. Soon she would be back at the base, where she would have to write detailed reports about everything that had happened during the mission. But first, she would finally get to meet the hostages whose rescue had required her to cross a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed again. She was no longer just a soldier who happened to be a sniper. She was now a combat veteran who had proven herself under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The helicopter ride back to base was a blur of exhaustion and relief. Maria sat in the cramped passenger compartment, still wearing her combat gear and holding her rifle across her knees. Across from her, the 4 rescued hostages were receiving medical attention from the helicopter's medic. Captain Jennifer Walsh, though clearly weakened by her ordeal, was alert and helping to care for her fellow soldiers. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez sat beside Maria, removing ammunition and equipment from his tactical vest. Despite the successful mission, his face showed the strain of leading men through a dangerous operation where everything could have gone wrong in an instant. "Hell of a job up there, Santos," he said over the noise of the rotors. "Those shots saved our asses when everything went sideways." Maria nodded but didn't trust herself to speak. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, and she was starting to fully comprehend what had happened during the firefight. She had killed at least 2 people tonight, maybe more. The training had prepared her for the technical aspects of long-range shooting, but nothing could have prepared her for the emotional reality of taking human lives. Captain Walsh looked up from the wounded soldier she was helping and caught Maria's eye. Even in her weakened condition, there was something in her expression that spoke of deep gratitude and understanding. She had seen what Maria had done during the extraction, had witnessed the precision shots that had allowed the rescue team to complete their mission. When the helicopter landed at the base, medical personnel immediately took charge of the rescued hostages. Maria watched them being loaded onto stretchers and transported to the medical facility, where they would receive proper treatment for injuries and malnutrition suffered during their captivity. Commander Jackson was waiting as the rescue teams disembarked from the helicopter. In the bright lights of the landing zone, Maria could see the relief on his face. Losing 4 soldiers to insurgent captivity had weighed heavily on him, and their successful rescue represented more than just a tactical victory. "Debrief in 1 hour," the commander announced to both teams. "Medical checks first, then, I want detailed reports from everyone involved in the operation." The medical check revealed what Maria already knew: she was dehydrated, exhausted, and suffering from muscle cramps after spending 14 hours in a sniper position. The medic gave her 4 fluids and pain medication, then cleared her for the mission debrief. The debrief took place in the same command tent where Maria had first learned about the mission 3 days earlier. This time, the tent was crowded with officers who wanted to understand exactly how the rescue had been accomplished and what lessons could be learned for future operations.
Staff Sergeant Rodriguez gave the primary briefing, walking the assembled officers through each phase of the extraction from the initial approach to the final withdrawal.
He described the firefight that had erupted when the team was discovered, and how precise sniper fire had suppressed enemy positions and allowed the team to extract the hostages successfully. The mission succeeded because of exceptional performance by all team members, Rodriguez concluded, but I want to specifically recognize the sniper support provided by Specialist Santos. Her fire was accurate, timely, and absolutely critical to our ability to complete the extraction under heavy enemy contact. Commander Jackson turned to Maria, who had been sitting quietly throughout the briefing. Santos, tell us about the shooting conditions and challenges you faced. Maria stood and walked to the map board, pointing to the ridge where she had positioned herself. Range to target was 847 meters with variable wind conditions throughout the day. Visibility was good, but target identification was complicated by civilian clothing and the need to avoid hitting friendly forces during the firefight. She described each shot she had taken, explaining the calculations and adjustments required for the long-range engagements. The assembled officers listened intently, understanding that her performance represented the difference between mission success and potential disaster.
How many confirmed enemy casualties? Asked Lieutenant Colonel Hayes.
At least 2 confirmed, possibly 4, Maria replied. Difficult to assess in darkness and combat conditions. After the formal debrief, Commander Jackson asked Maria to remain behind while the other personnel were dismissed. When they were alone, he sat down across from her and studied her face carefully. How are you handling this, Santos? He asked quietly.
Taking life for the first time changes a soldier. I need to know if you're going to be okay.
It was the question Maria had been dreading, partly because she wasn't sure of the answer herself. Sir, I did what was necessary to protect American lives. The enemy soldiers I engaged were actively threatening the extraction team and the hostages.
I have no regrets about my actions.
That's a professional answer, the commander observed.
I'm asking about the personal impact. How are you dealing with the fact that you killed people tonight?
Maria looked down at her hands, which were steady despite everything she had been through. I think about the hostages who are alive because of what I did. I think about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and his team making it home to their families.
That helps me understand why it was necessary. Commander Jackson nodded approvingly.
Good. But I want you to talk to the chaplain and the base counselor over the next few days. There's no shame in admitting that combat affects you. The strongest soldiers are the ones who deal honestly with the psychological impact of what they've experienced. 3 days later, Maria was cleaning her rifle in the weapons tent when Private Johnson approached her with obvious excitement.
Maria, have you heard? Captain Walsh is asking for you.
She wants to meet you before she's evacuated back to the States. Maria found Captain Walsh in the medical facility, where she was receiving treatment for injuries sustained during her captivity. Despite her condition, the intelligence officer was alert and had been debriefing with officers about the information she had gathered before her capture. Specialist Santos, Captain Walsh said as Maria entered her room.
I wanted to thank you personally for what you did.
I know it was your shooting that made our rescue possible. Just doing my job, ma'am, Maria replied, unsure how to respond to gratitude for actions that had required her to take lives. No, Captain Walsh said firmly.
What you did was extraordinary. I've been a soldier for 12 years, and I've seen a lot of combat.
Those shots you made in darkness, at that range, under pressure, that was exceptional marksmanship and courage.
She paused, studying Maria's face.
I also know what it costs to take life in combat. It changes you, whether you want it to or not. But what you did saved 4 American lives and allowed a successful mission that will help protect other soldiers in the future. Captain Walsh reached into her personal bag and pulled out a small military patch. It was the insignia of her intelligence unit, embroidered with the motto Truth and Consequences. I want you to have this, she said, offering the patch to Maria. As a reminder that the consequences of your actions were saving lives and accomplishing the mission.
Sometimes we have to do difficult things for the right reasons.
Maria accepted the patch, feeling the weight of its significance.
It represented recognition from another female soldier who understood the challenges of proving yourself in a male-dominated military environment.
2 weeks later, the entire base was assembled for a formation that included the presentation of combat decorations for the rescue mission. Maria stood with the other members of the extraction team as Commander Jackson read citations for various awards. Specialist Maria Santos, the commander, announced, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepid action in connection with combat operations against an armed enemy. Specialist Santos provided precision sniper support during a high-risk hostage rescue operation, engaging multiple enemy positions at extended range under difficult conditions. Her accurate fire suppressed enemy resistance and enabled the successful extraction of 4 American personnel from hostile captivity. As he pinned the Bronze Star Medal on her uniform, Commander Jackson spoke quietly so only she could hear.
"You've proven yourself beyond any doubt, Santos. You're one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command."
But the moment that would stay with Maria forever came after the formation was dismissed. As soldiers dispersed across the base, a figure approached her from the crowd of observers who had watched the ceremony. He was a tall man with graying hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service.
His uniform showed the insignia of a SEAL commander, and his chest displayed ribbons from multiple combat deployments.
Maria had never seen him before, but something about his presence commanded immediate respect. The SEAL commander stopped directly in front of Maria and came to attention. Then, slowly and deliberately, he rendered a perfect military salute.
"Outstanding work, soldier," he said simply, holding the salute until she returned it.
Maria felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized the significance of the moment. This veteran warrior, whose own career had been built on exceptional performance in the most demanding military operations, was publicly acknowledging her achievements. He was showing respect for her skills and courage, not as a female soldier who had exceeded expectations, but as a professional warrior who had accomplished an extraordinary mission. As the SEAL commander walked away, Maria understood that she had crossed more than just the line between training and combat. She had earned a place among the soldiers who could be counted on when everything was at stake, when the mission mattered more than personal safety or comfort. The Bronze Star on her chest represented official recognition from the military system. The patch from Captain Walsh represented acknowledgement from a fellow female soldier who understood her unique challenges. But the salute from a SEAL commander represented something even more valuable: acceptance into the brotherhood of warriors who had proven themselves under fire. That night, as Maria wrote a letter to her parents, she tried to explain what her recent experiences had meant without describing the specific details of classified operations. She told them about receiving recognition for her service, about the gratitude of soldiers whose lives had been saved, and about finally feeling that she belonged in the military community she had worked so hard to join. What she didn't tell them was that she now carried the weight of having taken human lives, or that she sometimes woke up thinking about the faces she had seen through her rifle scope. Those were burdens that came with the territory she had chosen, and she was learning to carry them with the help of counselors, chaplains, and fellow soldiers who understood the cost of combat. But she also carried the satisfaction of knowing that her skills and courage had made a difference when it mattered most. For American soldiers had returned home to their families because of her actions. A dangerous mission had succeeded because she had been strong enough and skilled enough to do what was necessary under the most challenging conditions. As she sealed the letter and prepared for another day of training and preparation for future missions, Maria Santos knew that she had finally found her place in the military. Not as a female soldier trying to prove she belonged, but as a warrior whose gender was irrelevant compared to her ability to accomplish the mission and protect her fellow soldiers. The recognition she had received was meaningful, but the knowledge that she could be trusted with the lives of others was worth more than any medal or commendation. In a world where actions mattered more than words, Maria had spoken with the voice of her rifle, and that voice had said everything that needed to be said.